My smile faded before I realized it had been there. It wasn't dramatic. No gasp, no tears. Just a small, quiet change like a light dimming in a room no one was paying attention to. 1 second I was listening, nodding politely, doing what I had learned to do so well. The next, I felt exposed, as if someone had gently pulled a chair out from under me and expected me to keep standing. A temporary fix, my fiancé's mother said, laughing softly as she stirred her wine. You know how young people are. She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't have to. Her friends smiled into their glasses. Someone cleared their throat. The table, long, polished, expensive, fell into a fragile silence that lasted just long enough for the words to settle where they were meant to land. On me, I sat there, hands folded neatly in my lap, my back straight, my legs crossed just so. 20 people surrounded me, people who had eaten my food, accepted my invitations, smiled at my engagement ring. People who had watched me try. The room smelled like roasted herbs and warm bread. Candles flickered gently, casting everything in gold. It should have felt celebratory. Instead, I felt very small, as if I had been reduced to a placeholder. Something temporary, something easily replaced. I had worked so hard to be welcome. From the beginning, I told myself to be patient. Daniel had warned me. They're traditional, he said. They take time. I believed him because I loved him, and because love makes you generous in ways you don't always notice. I laughed when jokes didn't include me. I listened when conversations drifted past me. I memorized names, birthdays, preferences. I wore neutral colors. I brought thoughtful gifts. I learned when to speak and, more importantly, when not to. I wanted to be chosen, not tolerated. His mother had always been polite, impeccably so, compliments that felt rehearsed. Questions that never quite reached curiosity. She called me sweet, the way someone might describe a temporary assistant or a pleasant neighbor. Never essential. That night, as her words hovered in the air, I looked at Daniel. He was staring at his plate. Not angry, not surprised, just quiet, and something in me finally understood that silence can be louder than cruelty. I felt heat rush to my face, followed by a strange calm, the kind that comes when you stop trying to prove yourself. When you realize the rules of the game were never written for you to win. I thought about all the times I had said yes, to helping, to paying, to just for now. I thought about the house we were sitting in, the one everyone referred to as the family home, the one I helped fund because it made sense, because it was practical, because I trusted. The truth surfaced gently, not like a slap, but like a tide pulling back to reveal what had always been there. I lifted my glass slowly. The crystal caught the light. My hand was steady, even though my chest felt tight. Relax, I said, my voice calm, almost warm. I'm the one funding this house. The words weren't sharp. They weren't meant to wound. They were simply true. The silence that followed was different, not polite. Not performative, honest. Someone shifted in their seat. A fork clinked against a plate. No one met my eyes. Daniel finally looked up, his expression unreadable. In that moment, I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel victorious. I felt awake. I realized how carefully I had been smiling, how often I had softened myself to make others comfortable. I had mistaken endurance for grace, silence for harmony, and I saw, clearly for the first time, that being kind should never require disappearing. I finished my drink slowly, placed the glass down, and folded my hands again. My heart was beating faster now, but my mind felt strangely still. Nothing else was said about it that night, but something had begun, not a confrontation, not a fight. A reckoning, quiet, patient, and inevitable. No one mentioned my words for the rest of the dinner. Plates were cleared. Dessert was served. Conversation resumed, careful and shallow. like stepping around broken glass without acknowledging it existed. Laughter returned in small, controlled doses. The evening ended with polite hugs and promises to do this again soon. But something had cracked, and everyone felt it. In the car on the way home, Daniel kept his eyes on the road. The city lights slid across his face, illuminating it in brief flashes familiar, handsome, distant. "You didn't have to say that," he finally said. His voice wasn't angry. That somehow made it worse. I waited, giving him space to finish the thought. He didn't. "Say what?" I asked quietly. "That you're funding the house, in front of everyone." He exhaled slowly. It embarrassed my mother. I turned toward the window, watching reflections blur across the glass. She called me a temporary fix. He was silent again. "She didn't mean it like that." He said at last, "You know how she is." I nodded because I did know how she was. That wasn't the problem. What hurt wasn't her comment. It was how easily he explained it away, how naturally he expected me to absorb it, smooth it over, keep the peace. The conversation ended there, not because it was resolved, but because I was tired of pushing against something that refused to move. Over the next few days, I started noticing details I had once ignored. The house paperwork still hadn't been updated. Next month, Daniel always said, the bills arrived addressed to his parents, but the payments left my account. When I suggested small changes, paint colors, furniture, storage, I was met with gentle resistance. "Let's not complicate things," his mother would say. At first, I believed that meant she valued simplicity. Later, I understood it meant control. One afternoon, I overheard her speaking to a friend in the kitchen. I wasn't trying to listen. I was carrying groceries, moving quietly, existing in the background the way I often did. "She's lovely," his mother said, lowering her voice just enough to sound discreet. "Very generous, but you know how these things go. Arrangements change." I stood frozen in the hallway, the weight of the bags cutting into my fingers. Arrangements, not relationships. Not commitments, arrangements. That word settled deep inside me, heavy and unmistakable. I didn't confront her. I didn't cry. I put the groceries away and went about my day as if nothing had happened. But something in me shifted from feeling to seeing. I began to watch patterns instead of moments. I noticed how financial conversations always happened without me, even when they involved my money. How Daniel deferred to his mother automatically, as if it were instinct. How my contributions were praised, but my presence was optional. At a family lunch, someone joked that I was such a blessing. His mother smiled and said, "Yes, she's very helpful." Helpful. Not loved, not equal. I started asking questions, not accusing ones, just careful, practical ones about timelines. About ownership, about plans. The answers were vague, reassuring without substance. "Why are you suddenly worried about this?" Daniel asked one night, frustration edging into his voice. "Don't you trust me?" I thought about that question for a long time before answering. "I trust you," I said slowly. But trust shouldn't require silence. He didn't reply. That was when I realized something painful but freeing. Trust that cannot survive questions is not trust. It's expectation. I began pulling back, not emotionally at first, but internally. I stopped volunteering solutions. I stopped smoothing over discomfort. I listened more than I spoke, not out of fear, but out of curiosity. And the more I listened, the clearer it became. I wasn't being prepared for a future. I was being used to support a present that didn't fully include me. That realization didn't break me. It steadied me. Because once the truth reveals itself, even quietly, it can no longer be ignored. And I was done pretending not to see. I didn't announce my change. I didn't warn anyone. I simply grew quieter. Not the kind of quiet that comes from fear or defeat, but the kind that listens, observes, waits. I had spent so long explaining myself, softening truths, smoothing tension, translating my needs into something more acceptable, that silence felt unfamiliar at first. Then it felt honest. I stopped offering help before it was requested. I stopped stepping in when conversations turned awkward. When decisions were made without me, I let them stand. I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't rush to make things easier. The answer came slowly but clearly. When I didn't remind Daniel about bills, he assumed they were paid. When I didn't attend every family gathering, no one asked if I was okay, only if I was busy. When I didn't contribute suggestions for the house, the rooms stayed unfinished. My absence revealed how much of my presence had been taken for granted. One evening, Daniel noticed the distance. We were sitting on opposite ends of the couch, the television on but muted. He asked if something was wrong. I told him I was tired. It wasn't a lie. I was tired of being useful instead of valued, tired of proving my worth through effort, tired of loving in a space where love had conditions I was never told about. He nodded, kissed my forehead, and turned the sound back on. That small moment told me everything I needed to know. I began paying closer attention to how his mother spoke to me when we were alone. The politeness sharpened. Compliments became reminders of obligation. "We're so grateful for everything you do," she said one afternoon, placing her hand over mine. Family supports family. I looked at her carefully. She had never once called me family before. I smiled and withdrew my hand gently. "Of course," I replied, but I made a note of the phrasing, family when it benefits them, temporary when it doesn't. I started organizing my finances quietly, not in secret, but privately. I spoke to professionals. I reviewed agreements I had trusted without reading closely. I learned how much of my security depended on goodwill instead of clarity. It frightened me, but only at first. Fear gave way to resolve. I didn't accuse Daniel. I didn't demand explanations. I simply asked for transparency. "Can we talk about the house?" I said one evening. "Long term," he sighed. "Why now?" "Because I live there. That conversation didn't go the way I hoped." He spoke in circles. He reassured me without answering. He promised future adjustments without dates. I watched him carefully as he spoke, and I realized he wasn't trying to deceive me. He was trying to avoid discomfort. And he had learned somewhere along the way that my comfort was negotiable. After that, I stopped asking questions out loud. I asked them internally instead. What would happen if I stopped contributing financially? Would the relationship still feel stable? Would I still be included or merely tolerated? The answers came in small moments, a delayed text, a meeting I wasn't told about, a family dinner scheduled without checking my availability. Nothing cruel, nothing explosive, just consistent. That's how emotional dishonesty works. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It counts on your patience. It waits for you to doubt your own instincts. But my instincts had grown quiet enough to be heard. One night, lying awake beside Daniel, I understood something essential. Love should not require strategy. Belonging should not feel conditional. And silence, when used wisely, reveals more than confrontation ever could. I wasn't angry. I was clear. And clarity, I learned, is the beginning of strength. I didn't know yet what I would do. But I knew, without question, that I could no longer stay the way I was, and that knowledge, gentle, firm, undeniable, was already changing everything. I didn't leave in anger. That surprises people when they hear my story later, because they expect a breaking point. A sharp argument, raised voices, doors slammed shut. But my leaving wasn't born from outrage. It came from acceptance. Acceptance that nothing needed to explode for it to be over. I chose a Tuesday morning because the house was quiet then. Sunlight spilled softly across the kitchen counter, illuminating the things I had once chosen with care. Mugs I bought because Daniel liked them. Curtains I paid for but never truly owned. a space that looked like home, yet never quite felt like mine. I packed slowly. Each folded sweater felt like a small act of reclaiming myself, not because the items mattered, but because the decision did. No one rushed me, no one stopped me. That absence of resistance was its own answer. Daniel watched from the doorway. "Is this really necessary?" he asked, not unkindly. I thought about how many times I had asked myself that same question about staying, about adjusting, about enduring. "Yes," I said simply. He looked confused, hurt, but not surprised. That told me everything. His mother appeared a few minutes later, composed as ever. She surveyed the boxes, her expression carefully neutral. "I hope you find what you're looking for," she said. I met her eyes. There was no bitterness in me anymore, no desire to explain myself. I already have. I replied softly, and I meant it. I moved into a smaller apartment across town. It wasn't impressive. The floors creaked. The windows faced a quiet street instead of manicured gardens, but the space felt honest, mine. The first night there, I slept deeply for the first time in months. No calculating, no anticipating moods, no wondering if I was doing enough, just rest. Over time, the silence healed me. Not the lonely kind, the peaceful kind that lets your thoughts settle into their natural shape. I began noticing how light moved across the walls in the morning, how I breathed more easily, how my laughter sounded fuller when it wasn't measured. I untangled myself carefully, legally, responsibly. There were conversations, paperwork, quiet acknowledgments. No one fought me, no one chased me. That hurt more than conflict ever could. Months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that the house had been sold. Financial strain, miscalculations, unexpected pressure. I felt nothing sharp, no satisfaction, no regret, just distance, because by then I understood something important. Consequences don't need witnesses to be real. I ran into Daniel once, unexpectedly, at a cafe. We exchanged polite words. He looked tired, older. "I didn't realize how much you were carrying," he said. I believed him. I didn't either. I answered. And that was the truth. I learned slowly and gently that love without respect erodes the soul, that generosity, when unguarded, becomes a quiet form of self-abandonment, that boundaries are not punishments, they are protections. The hardest lesson was also the simplest. If you must shrink to be accepted, you are not being loved. Walking away didn't make me cold. It didn't harden me. It made me honest. I still believe in kindness. I still give, but now I give where I am seen, where my presence is welcomed without conditions. And when I smile now, it isn't something I wear. It's something I feel, because choosing myself quietly, firmly, without spectacle, was the most dignified decision I've ever made. And for the first time, that feels like enough.